Welcome everyone to Oroco Resource Corp's first town hall of 2026. I'm Oroco's chairman, Craig DL, and beside me we have Ian Graham, the president of Oroco, as well as Silent Mike Leahy, who is responsible for our marketing efforts. So today, what I think I'd like to do, because of the fact that, as we understand it, there's a number of new shareholders, of course, as a result of our recent financing, and some of whom have clearly joined this town hall today. I'd like to run through a quick history of Oroco, such that everybody, at least those involved today in this town hall, understand how we got to where we are today, and it's important to understand that Oroco is now we are into our 20th year of our existence. We were formed I formed the company in 2006. We initially took on a gold project in Sonora State, Mexico, which we developed to a certain degree and then ultimately sold to a company called Gold Group in 2013. And along that way, we became aware of Santo Tomas and what we saw as obviously a very compelling acquisition opportunity. But the problem with it at the time, of course, was that it was highly complicated from a legal ownership perspective. And despite the fact that it was first actually introduced to the board of Oroco in 2011 as a potential acquisition, and I'm talking about, of course, Santo Tomas, it was the legals were so complicated that the board declined participation at that point in time. What resulted is a small private group of individuals, including myself, took the project forward on our own, and subsequently vended the rights that we acquired during that process to the company in 2017, by which time we'd been able to sort out much of the legals. Ultimately, the project was registered to a company called Xochipala Gold, which was a subsidiary formed by Oroco along the way, and that subsidiary took title to Santo Tomas and all the core concessions that were associated with it, as well as by agreement certain peripheral concessions, essentially in 2020. And so it was at that point in time that we began to advance a project which was already well known to us because of the substantial previous work that had been done on the project itself, initially back in the 1960s, but followed up very, very seriously in the 1990s. And that work had resulted in a positive feasibility study issued by Bateman Engineering, which was essentially the core of our rationale in acquiring the project in Oroco. So in reaching the point where we are today, I think it's important to stress where we believe we are with respect to the position we're in now, as opposed to where we have from which we have come, in the sense of the history of ourselves and Santo Tomas, which or most of you would know, as being essentially on hold for the most part. We have not been drilling on site since January of 2023. A 3-year hiatus, so to speak, that was primarily associated with the adverse regulatory conditions in Mexico, which have prevailed until very recently. But through a lot of the work that was done in 2025, we've been able to reestablish the opportunity that we strongly feel exists at Santo Tomas. And now we've been able to basically establish um, four pillars of support for the project. And I'll just go through them very quickly. First off is the community and our community engagement and our profile within the Choice municipality and the area surrounding Choice and Santo Tomas. Um, Thanks to the work of Ubaldo Treviso and his team in that town, um, they have done an excellent job of establishing Oroco's name as well as, of course, Xochipala Gold within that community. That work is being done at all levels, municipal, with the ejidos in the area. Um, Certainly, in all aspects of the community in general. And as a result of that, I think it went a long ways to encouraging Faisal Rodriguez, a well-established Mexican mining executive, to join our board late last year. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But the bottom line is that community engagement and how we've been received and encouraged to take the project forward in the local area has been very, very supportive. The second aspect, the second pillar, so to speak, is the regulatory environment. And I'll combine that with the political environment because in some respects they work hand in hand. And that circumstance started to evolve in a very positive fashion in April of last year, led by a particular politician who resides in Las Mochas by the name of Mario Zamora. And Mario initiated a political process that ultimately culminated in support being generated at the political levels, at the federal and state levels, in such a manner where we were actually dealing with the relevant decision makers. And that political support ultimately evolved into a scenario whereby we were able to, of course, then attract the interest of Faisal Rodriguez, who is highly adept at dealing with the regulatory environment in Mexico, primarily through the work he has done in various other mining projects, El Sazal, but most noteworthy of late being his senior role with Torex Gold. The bottom line to that is that we now have a very, I think, clear pathway to the advancement of this project, both by way of the permitting process itself, as well as the considerable political support that we see at all levels. So the third pillar, which is of course essential to the advancement of a project like Santo Tomas, is our technical team, led by Richard Locke, who's an extremely capable, highly recognized, and very direct and effective leader of our technical team, as a mining engineer who's well known within the mining community, and provides us with all the direction and strength that we need from a technical perspective. Also, of course, including Ian Graham and Andrew Ware in Hermosillo, all capable, very capable and skilled individuals, all of whom are highly committed to the project. So the fourth pillar is one that essentially we've been trying to secure for some time, and that is the financial support that's capable of taking us through the pre-feasibility work that is necessary to advance this project to the point at which it actually becomes a marketable commodity, so to speak. And that has been recently achieved largely through the work of Ian and Mike, and I was able to help a little bit towards the end of a lengthy process, which ultimately engaged Canaccord Genuity. And through the work there of Gunnar Egertson and his team, we were able to put together a relationship which recently, as you will all probably know, resulted in a $20 million financing, which had a 15% green shoe, which was fully subscribed. As a matter of fact, as we understand it from Canaccord, the overall financing was substantially oversubscribed beyond the green shoe limits. So, and I think you've seen that as in terms of our that type of support has become evident in the post-financing market for Oroco stock. So the bottom line is we now see ourselves as having those four critical pillars in support of the Santo Tomas project, in support of Oroco in general. And I'm now going to make the observation that essentially for the first time since Oroco was formed in 2006, I can honestly say that I truly believe that the pathway forward for Oroco is clear. We know exactly where we're going. We know what we need to do to get there. We have the means to get there. The support is there in all necessary respects. And I think we're going to see some big things happen in this company over the next 12 to 18 months. So with that, on that note, I'm just now going to introduce you to Ian Graham, who's going to walk you through essentially our on-site plans for 2026.
Thanks, Craig, and Happy New Year all. And we're starting off exactly as teed up by Craig on a happy and positive note. So I'm pleased to be able to review briefly what we plan to do in 2026 and hopefully propel ourselves to questions where we can nut out the detail for the year. Principal focus getting back into action in town. One thing to note, we have maintained the community program throughout the period of quiescence and drilling. That has been led by Donibaldo, as Craig pointed out, and a large part of the support for the community pillar that Craig described was generated, maintained by Ubaldo's presence and constant attention to community and social matters. In terms of the technical, we immediately are looking to kick off drilling, and drilling will focus on South Zone resource work, which is intended to raise the classification of the resource at the South Zone from inferred to indicated. It is necessary to have all of the resource in the indicated category to proceed to feasibility study levels of detail. So a PFS requires an indicated resource. So we'll be working on that to begin. Along with that resource infill work, we'll be expanding our definition of the South Zone a little to encompass some areas of resource that we anticipate will fold in because we've seen outcrop outside the PEA pit limit extents. So we're expecting that pit to grow a little. So that'll be the focus of that work. We also need to do some geotechnical work. This work will be focused on understanding pit performance and where we can adjust pit angles for a more detailed mine plan that will attend the PFS. We also need to do some geohydrological work focused in North Zone, but also in the South Zone, because our PEA identified one of the process water sources as being the pit and circumpit area. So we need to define that so we can quantify the potential for those water resources. So a series of programs, when we do the geotechnical work and the geohydrological work, where appropriate, we'll site those drill holes to assist with upgrading the resource estimation and the block model. So currently we have SRK with some assistance from Whittle Consulting in Australia, building out that drill plan, basically improving a rough drill plan that Oroco had prepared in order to give us the best bang for the buck, so to speak, in terms of how we execute the coming drill program. So we're really pleased with how that's coming together. We anticipate we'll have the sort of ultimate plan in the next month or so. The other very significant piece of work that we will begin in preparation for the PFS is the environmental baseline work. And I would reference again Faisal Rodriguez and his connections with the regulators and with those that do baseline and other environmental work in terms of the contribution to getting a robust baseline process started. We're aiming for 1st of April. That will run for 1 year. We need to cover off 4 seasons of recording work to be ready for us in Q2 of 2027. So that will be a key focus. We're benefiting substantially, I'm pleased to say, from some of the trade-off opportunities that have been identified in the iterative whittle work. And so we'll be embedding those in the scope of the PFS. And another principal area of focus as we prepare for PFS will be consideration of tailings options. So we're going to get more detailed in the tailings space as we prepare to put the PFS together. So those are the main focus points of the social initiative, of the technical initiative, which will kick off shortly at site. I'll be down in Choix next week, late next week, and we will be working to prepare to mobilize drills, etc. The drill bids are out with the potential drill companies, and we're hoping to mobilize in mid-February approximately.
So hopefully we can get to more discussion of the program itself once we go to the Q&A session. But in the meantime, I'd like to refer to Mike for purposes of a quick outline as to how we're going to express and describe all of these activities to the investment community over the coming year. Mike?
Thank you, Craig. So from a social media and marketing perspective, I think that 2025 was an extremely successful year. We were able to build quite a significant base, an audience that is quite active and engaged. And for us, it's just about communicating the message consistently and transparently. And all of the activities that Ian has spoken about are going to be part of that messaging that we're going to be able to put together for 2026. Just a quick overview of 2025. Some quick facts that stood out to me in the year in review. We had a LinkedIn growth, our followers of almost 100%. So it tells us our audience and our followers are extremely engaged and they're interested in hearing what we have to say. Our average post engagement was 8.85%, which is very good. And that's over 916 posts throughout the year. We expanded into new platforms, which we weren't really present on before, and we're going to continue to do so. Into 2026, we're going to continue that, and we're going to have a bit of a budget. So that's to say, 2025 was mostly organic. There was very little money spent on the program. So we will have a bit of a budget in 2026, and I think that's going to make the campaigns a little bit more impactful and have a little bit more reach. We're also going to look at some conferences and events that we're going to be attending, mostly with a focus on North America, Canada, US, and Mexico. We're looking at some interviewers, podcasters, influencers, and newsletters that we'll be engaging with that have large audiences and big reaches. That's going to be able to get the Oroco message in front of their audience. And we're looking at some potential roadshows, 1 or 2 roadshows that will get us into primarily the United States, where I think there's lots of interest, and Oroco fits the story, I think, very well there. And obviously these town hall meetings, we're probably going to plan to do one every couple months. And as an example, I mean, we had 143 registers for this town hall, and we got up to 84 currently. So,
Attendees.
84 attendees, and at 80 right now, it tells us that people are very interested in hearing what we have to say, and social media for us is the most efficient and economical way of giving the message out to people quickly and as up to date as possible.
Thank you, Mike. So I think it's best now that we give everybody that's attending this town hall the opportunity to step forward with their questions. It'll help to add some meat to the bones of what we've just outlined. And so for those of you that want to speak, please now disclose yourselves.
You can just type your message into the chat if you like, or raise your hand.
As we wait, I might comment. Mike's indication of our plans to communicate more broadly and be present is facilitated by the fact that he now actually has a modest budget, whereas the gains made last year were made almost entirely organically and without any significant commitment to travel or communications budgets. So well done, I think, growing the platforms organically, and we're really looking forward to seeing what occurs now that we can put a little bit of
So the first question we have is, will there be some holes in Brasiles?
Okay, so I'm gonna take this for a reason. First off, from a corporate development point of view, I don't see that being as particularly advantageous right now. We've got a reasonable idea of what exists at Brasiles. It's not a compelling target. What we've done instead is acquire a project at Vania, which has much of the same setting from a geological perspective as does Santo Tomas. And for us, that is a much greater priority during 2026. And Ian now can describe quickly give us a quick overview on what we see at Vania.
Vania has evidence of a significant mineralized breccia in the western part of the property, and in the central part of the property are some alteration features, iron magnetite alteration skarn development, and these are both features that are associated with significant volcanic activity, the sort that is generated by porphyry intrusions, usually deeper than those other features. So they are evidence at surface of porphyry activity. We have skarns, for example, at Santo Tomas itself, right adjacent to Santo Tomas. There is also some mapped evidence of porphyry a little south of those mineralized expressions. So it looks like there's a reasonably large volcanic system, and there's evidence that that system has driven mineralizing systems. The iron material that I referenced has been mined at a small scale, a little mine called Mazamica. So, and there's been some underground drifting into the breccias that identified copper and silver mineralization. So we're going to want to test the skarns and the breccias, but also deploy mapping, perhaps some geophysics, to try and identify where the porphyry might be mineralized. So it's a sort of multi-part project, and we'll be putting that together and advancing it in 2026. So exciting, and as Craig intimated, has the potential for another very, very significant mineralized occurrence, perhaps porphyry, but certainly the breccia seems to be fairly sizable and to be pervasively mineralized. What we have yet to establish is the grade and distribution of the mineralization.
Thank you, Ian. So Tim has posed a question. Is there any chance of expedited permitting from the Mexican government? The fact is, Tim, we don't need any further permitting at this stage. We are permitted all the way through the exploration phase of the project. Ultimately, we'll need to engage in a permitting process relating to exploitation. In other words, the development, physical development of the project beyond the actual mineral exploration. And but that is something that we will be starting to work on in terms of the preparatory phases leading to the exploitation permitting process in approximately the middle of March. But otherwise, at this point in time, we don't require any permits. Raziel has asked about our views on copper prices and how they affect Santo Tomas's economics. I don't know what I can say here, but I'll try and couch this in a way that doesn't get me in trouble with the regulatory authorities. We've had a highly regarded professional group organization do some assessments of the the preliminary economic assessment results of 2024. And in there, they did some calculations relating to the results specifically generated with respect to the resource. And by increasing the copper price, for example, from by 10%, it caused an overall increase in the value of the project by approximately 20 to 25%. I'm not going to give you the exact number because I don't have the exact number, but it was in that range. You can therefore do the math. It's pretty consistent in terms of where certain increases would take the overall value of the project thereafter. In terms of forecasting copper prices, I can't really, but I mean, obviously, there's a very strong copper thesis out there that is becoming more and more aware, I think, not only within the investment community, but certainly within the mining community. And the fact is that I think there's a strong belief that copper prices are going to stay within the general range of where they are now. I think there's there's more optimism for higher prices than lower prices from here. So that's essentially all I think I should say on the subject today. So Mr. Anonymous has asked, what in your view are the greatest risks to this investment? Well, my personal view is that the greatest risk resides with a change in course of the Mexican government. But we see no indication whatsoever that will occur. And the reason is that they have recently changed course, and they've changed course on a nationwide basis to become more proactive and supportive of their base industrial activity, and that of course includes mining. There will occasionally be resistance that will show up in one area or another of the country in regard to mining initiatives. But the bottom line is we've had no NGO activity in our area at all throughout all the years that we've been busy at Santo Tomas. The support, as I said earlier, has been universal. And it just happens to be located, the project itself happens to be located in an area where there is absolutely no doubt of the necessity of this project for the welfare of that community and the general northern area of Sinaloa in which it resides. So yes, it certainly is a risk, but in a practical sense, the regulatory environment is not. It is certainly manageable. We're going to get a lot of guidance from people like Mario Zamora and most particularly Faisal Rodriguez in that respect. And with regard to this myth that cartels are a threat to projects like Santo Tomas, that's all it is. In reality, if one was to practically analyze business opportunity and you would put yourselves in the place of the cartels, you'd want to encourage projects like Santo Tomas to flourish. I don't have to get into the reasons why that's obvious. The bottom line is we are well supported in every respect, and we don't anticipate a surprise in any respect. Is the plan financing in Mexico through Santo Tomas Cobre? Well, okay. No, off the table. It is. Sorry, I didn't read that very well, but I jumped ahead a little bit. Santo Tomas Cobre, as it was conceived a couple of months ago, has ultimately ended up being named Santo Tomas Copper. We couldn't get the name Santo Tomas Cobre. No, the plan to advance and rebrand Xochipala Gold to Santo Tomas Copper SA to CV is still very much in play. It's strategic to do so. It helps us position the company more specifically as a company with Mexican roots. In other words, our operations are more in tune with local expectations, a local identity, and it somewhat reduces the identity and the influence that Oroco Resource Corp as a Canadian mining exploration company may have within the Mexican communities in general. In other words, we are better off to be identified as being more Mexican than less. That is part of the objective. The secondary purpose to the rebranding of what is now Santo Tomas Copper is that it positions us to be able to finance in a different way that is more specific to the value of the project itself. Santo Tomas Copper is the registered owner of Santo Tomas. And yes, while Canaccord has certainly stepped up very favorably on the Oroco side of the equation, the bottom line is having Santo Tomas Copper available for project-related financing is highly advantageous to our go-forward strategies. How many holes are being planned to be drilled in?
So we don't have a final number because SRK, Whittle, and particularly Andrew Ware are working through the final plan. But yes, all the drilling will be done in 2026. And we're aiming to do it sort of earlier rather than later. That will enable work to continue on resource estimation, etc., even ahead of the PFS.
So Quinn's asking about the increase in the ownership of Santo Tomas, and it went from 85.5% to 87%. That happened because of the conversion of debt obligations to Oroco that existed in Xochipala Gold, in other words, Santo Tomas Copper. We converted that to additional shares of ownership in the operating subsidiary. So did it cost money? No, it didn't cost us anything because it's money that was essentially put into the project by Oroco that ultimately converted to additional ownership of the operating subsidiary. We've said many times over the years that ownership could go to 90%. Yes, it could. It could go higher, actually, marginally higher. Why has this not yet happened? Well, it's a matter of, in one respect, it would involve a purchase of the remaining interest in the operating subsidiary. Those terms have been discussed previously. We didn't feel it was prudent to spend the money in previous years to make that acquisition, but it's something that's essentially still on the table. And as finances allow going forward, I'm confident that we will make an acquisition of the balance of the ownership that we don't own today in the operating subsidiary, Santo Tomas Copper. Plus, we have agreements with our local partners with respect to a project interest that we expect will be amended essentially in our favor over time as well. For much the same reason, because of the scope of the investment of the project to date and what we will experience in the future. So Connor's asking about the current update, for an update on the Mexican regulatory environment. I don't know when this was posted, this question. I think I just covered it. The path to permitting through all of the exploration, which is all of that associated with the preliminary feasibility study, all of that is in hand. All those permits are in hand. How far will the existing financing take us? It'll take us most of the way through the PFS. We will then be in a position where certain warrants could be converted, and or Canaccord, of course, is standing ready to proceed with the balance of the financing. If and when, well, I think we can reasonably expect that an amount will be necessary. If we were to ballpark it today, I'd say another 10 million or so will get us well through the PFS process. And Connor has also asked, with new financing, is there any change for your ultimate goal for monetization? No. Our target is still a very specific liquidity path that relates to the preparation of this project to a development status that essentially makes it an acquisition target for any number of potential candidates. We would be willing to look at any kind of development relationship that may be more advantageous to the shareholders of Oroco than a simple sale of the project, but it would have to be on a basis whereby that was a better option to the shareholders. So otherwise, the target remains the same. The liquidity path is the same. We anticipate being in position to sell this project, most likely, and in terms of a range from a timing perspective, I would suggest at or around the time we complete the PFS in early to mid 2027. On the other property, how does that fit into the plan of an eventual sale of Santo Tomas? It's not the Vinea project is not necessary to the sale of Santo Tomas. It will be for now. It's an asset that's owned more directly by Oroco. It may ultimately remain as a second project for Oroco, independent of Santo Tomas. It truly depends on how the project matures and whether we make a decision to combine the projects or isolate Santo Tomas on a sale basis ultimately, and then carry on with the company in development of Vinea. Is that a fair statement, Ian?
I think that's fair. Yeah, it's an option play to consolidate a district. Yeah.
How will the budget be divided for infill drilling and new ground drilling at Vinea? I'm going to say 90-10.
That's roughly right.
90 at Santo Tomas.
Yeah.
Connor, again, do you believe there will be any major challenges to receiving the exploitation permits? Yeah, I mean, that's what I referred to earlier. There's always that possibility, and we have to be practical about that, Connor. But that's part of why the involvement of Faisal Rodriguez and the various political influences that are supporting this project is so important. we will be well advised as to how best to negotiate and navigate the regulatory environment. Um, this project, I cannot emphasize more specifically how important this project is to that region in Sinaloa. We've been told that there is no other hope, and that's a precise quote. There is no other hope for the generation of sufficient economic activity in that region of northeastern Sinaloa as that which is presented by Santo Tomas. So the wind is, as to quote Ian, the wind is clearly at our backs now on this in a general sense. And how we go about the permitting process, we believe will be well guided by Faisal and others associated with the project. Could you reiterate an expected start date for the upcoming drill campaign? Well, I'll just say this. I know this already, that we're already busy on site opening up the roads to gain access to the drill sites. Ian can describe what's happened with the status, the current contract in terms of the drilling and what's being done to realize that, and how quickly the drill contractor, whoever that may be, can be mobilized thereafter.
So we're aiming at mid-February, Matthew, starting with 2 drills, but with the opportunity to expand upward. Some of the geotechnical drilling and the hydrogeological drilling will probably be done by drills that are not doing the infill drilling. We'll bring in other drills to do that somewhat speciality work. So we'll start with 2, expanding to 3 or 4. And one of those drills will go to Vinea for a short period. So, the sort of organization of the drills is crystallizing now, but we'll be commencing with 2 drills at Santo Tomas as soon as we can.
So HW has asked the question about Vinea, and would the exploration there increase the PFS copper resource? No, it wouldn't. However, he also asks, or would it be more of a value add for a potential acquirer to show the potential of a bigger mining district? Yes, in fact, that's part of the optionality we were referencing regarding its situation that Ian previously described.
Yeah.
Marco, obviously there's quite a bit of work ahead to complete the PFS, etc. But are there any ongoing discussions with majors who have expressed interest in the project and are monitoring progress? Richard is actually a better person to answer this question, but I'm going to try and speak for him in this circumstance. Obviously there is a lot of work, as Marco notes. There have been ongoing discussions, a substantial number of discussions, some of which are ongoing, and I'm just going to speak in general terms throughout 2025, and to some degree still going on with outside parties that would be properly characterized as potential acquisitors of the project. Personally, from my perspective, I believe that we're better to advance the project, and I think Richard concurs with me on this one, advance the project to the point of greater certainty as to the value of the asset before we continue to any sort of outreach to acquisitors of any sort. Those that choose to come to us, I believe very strongly is a better initial negotiating position. And therefore, this is all about us advancing this project to a point at which potential acquisitors literally can't help themselves. They have to come to us. And so that's essentially where we stand. Yes, there are discussions. No, we're not seeking further discussions other than with those that choose to come to us. However, again, I emphasize, the further we advance this project this year, the better and stronger our position is.
I can tackle the Whittle question. So the strategic options study that was commenced in the middle of 2025 was looking for mine plan trade-offs and opportunities that could improve the net present value of the project. So it's an integrated review that they do. We did end up through the detail of the work, sub-blocking of the block model and a number of other sort of parameter reviews, identifying that our metallurgical work, the samples we had used and their locations were potentially on average harder than most of the material in the ore body, something like 70 to 80%. And that came out of really just detailed reviews and the reviews of multiple variables. That's a very significant discovery because we would process a little more material using a little less energy if indeed a large part of the resource is more readily grindable, breakable than we had assumed in the PEA. And as a result, we're actually in the process of changing the flow sheet for processing of samples, our grade samples, to include determination of breakage and grindability parameters in phase 2 of the project, and we'll probably go back to some of the existing core and do similar work on the historical materials, and that will then reinform where we do the next bout of metallurgical work. But the potential to reduce the aggregate energy to process ore and to have a little more throughput on a similarly scaled plant as the one in the PEA or any given plant design exists, and that has quite a significant impact on the operating parameters of the plant to the benefit. Little more material fed, slightly higher recoveries in places, leading to more copper for less cost. So that has been an outcome. It was not one of the expected outcomes of the Whittle work. That is not the particular rabbit hole we expected to go down, but it was identified as one of the parameters in the Whittle work. And that's why these trade-off reviews by third parties who spend a lot of time working on multiple projects and seeing the things that add a little value here and there on operating mines, on projects, etc., is so valuable. So one of the takeaways for me for 2025, we didn't drill, there was a lot that we did not do last year. We changed the politics, I think, very significantly, the permitting environment, Faisal joining the board. But the Whittle work, for me as a technical person, was a very good arrow in our quiver because we've identified a couple of areas where we can improve the ultimate project, the ultimate PFS for Santo Tomas. Some of these improvements are modest, but they all vector in the right direction. And I'm excited that we're going to change some of the phase 2 workflows to capture information we didn't in phase 1. And so, I think a very, very significant outcome for our engagement with Whittle. Really good. And they deployed quite a number of very skilled people in reviewing our project and data. So, obviously I'm a technical person. I like when technical studies and work get done, but I think we got some real, some results with gravitas from that work. So I'm really thrilled with that. Great question. Thanks for asking it.
So Peter asks, have we been approached by majors already, and are we considering hiring an investment bank? Two-part answer. The first one is that I don't personally. I'd prefer not to discuss any of the discussions that have gone on with the majors, primarily because of the reason that I have not been central to the great majority of them. That's been something that is purely been the responsibility taken on by Richard. I can say this, that none have surfaced in a way that have caused myself or anybody associated with the company outside Richard, essentially, to respond in any way. I know that there have been some very detailed discussions, but the bottom line is, I think we're all clear that we are much better off to advance this project further before we allow ourselves to get caught up in discussions that may be of some significant consequence. As far as hiring or considering hiring an investment bank, we are very comfortable with how our relationship has started with Canaccord Genuity. We don't see any need to look any further than that at this point in time. Again, that may be something that we look at in conjunction with the advice we're getting from Canaccord Genuity, but it's not a necessary step at this stage. Quinn is asking, how long will the money last? And what are you doing to cut costs? Well, the money will last certainly to the end or close to the end of this year at the pace that we anticipate.
Sure.
The question about cutting costs is an interesting one because I think we made it very clear on several occasions in the past that we had cut costs as far as we could literally cut costs and at the same time being able to keep the company together, keep the project. I'm talking about the concessions and the key people and all that is necessary to remain compliant from a regulatory perspective. We had cut that to the absolute minimum throughout 2025. It was one of the first steps that I did when I became more involved in January of last year. The bottom line is this. We're going to have to restore some of our salary levels, most certainly. Virtually everybody in this company made a sacrifice across the board from levels that I do not believe even reached what would be considered to be a medium level for companies of this nature in the resource sector. But obviously we're going to have to add certain additional service providers and the like, all of which will be done on a best cost basis. And so the concept of cutting costs, I'm sorry to say, Quinn, was left behind us some time ago.
And perhaps I'd add, we're fortunate. Our little fleet of pickup trucks we own, they're paid for. The camps that we have available to us, they're there. Most of the roads we've built are almost serviceable. We do need to do surface work and put in one or two retaining walls. But all those investments we made, replacing gates with cattle grids and all of that stuff, we don't need to do for phase 2. We've got great access, we've got the communications, we've got the camps, and so those costs that are accumulated as you build and start out and figure out how to operate, we won't be taking those in phase 2. So those are in effect help keep those unanticipated costs down. So the focus is on expediting the work now, working with groups and people we know, and moving forward. So, hopefully that will reflect in better operating costs.
Alex asks, is there any plan to go directly to a feasibility study as opposed to a pre-feasibility study? Alex, that's a question that I think will come from, well, first off, it'll be driven by Richard and the technical team over the next 6 to 8 months. As the data is acquired and processed, then that sort of decision will be made in terms of whether we see that additional study being achievable within a reasonable time frame thereafter. It also depends on how the M&A environment evolves along the way. So as it is today, there is no plan to go directly to feasibility study status, but Again, that's a decision that'll be made by Richard and the technical team. Is there any update on the interested parties? I'm assuming we're talking about M&A potential. None that I haven't referenced earlier in a very general but somewhat cautious way. It's not something that it's not part of our immediate focus. I'll just say that. Quinn Hughes, is the company still looking to acquire additional concessions, specifically buying more land north to connect to the Chinese mine? There is no need, Quinn, to bridge that gap between ourselves and Baharachi. We are still in discussions with Xinzhuan, the owners of Baharachi. It's a very protracted and painful process, I'll tell you that. But I'll also say I don't believe they're going anywhere. Their best solution, candidly, from every point of assessment, is ultimately to make a deal with us. But it's got to be something that basically we can work with. So in terms of acquiring any ground in between, it's not necessary. What MBV are you targeting for selling the project?
That's
The best that we can justify. Well, it's the best that we can justify is the answer. I mean, that's where we're going, and it's as simple as it is. Thank you for the town hall. Well, listen, thank you for the number of attendees. I think we've now hit 90, which is really it's great. It's great to know that people have that kind of interest in terms of what we're doing. As I said earlier, I really believe very strongly that we're now finally in a position after 20 years of a evolution of a company that started out with a small gold project in Sonora, that we now we've taken our first bite out of the elephant, and we can continue to advance this company now in all respects. And I know our market has lagged very significantly over the last 3 years. I think we all understand the reasons why. The bottom line is I think that's all behind us, and we're looking at just a great opportunity for particularly for new investors. This is a great time for the company in that context, and I think Canaccord recognized that. I mean, I should tell you that just to go back to the financing of the company that was finished last week, literally within a 24-hour period, the financing proposal that was put to us increased from essentially a $7 million certainty on a $10 million proposal to request to increase the financing to $20 million, and ultimately resulting in a $23 million financing over a 24-hour period. And of course, there were a lot of things that happened that benefited us at that particular time. It was right in the throes of a spike and another spike in copper prices. But the bottom line is, I think what also happened is once Canaccord started to basically put the Oroco story out to its clients, it suddenly started to build momentum, essentially just around that awareness, so that the concept of the or the context of the increased awareness combined with the substantial increase in copper prices, and the continued advancement of the overall copper thesis, which is extremely strong. It most specifically contributed to the $23 million financing that resulted. You mentioned the 1-year environmental study, Q1 2026.
It is a time constraint for us. We do need to do a year's worth of work. It's important to note that those baselines can stale date. So that's the reason we haven't started earlier. We knew the constraints, but we chose not to start until we were commencing drilling for phase 2 to make sure that once we have the baseline, the couple of years that it is valid after completion remain intact. So that's the reason for the timing. But yes, 1 year we have to collect 1 year's worth of data.
The company has said many times over the years that potential acquirers will do their own PEA PFS. Is this happening? Well, Quinn, you're asking us to tell you what other companies are doing. So we can't answer that question really. We believe that that's happening. That's part of what typically does happen. So there's no reason to believe it isn't happening. Further, you ask, is it possible that you will get offers for the mine before the PFS? Obviously, that's entirely possible. Would it be advantageous for us to entertain offers before the PFS is completed? More likely not. I think Richard has always been, and I refer to Richard in these circumstances because I think he's the best authority in this regard in terms of what milestones we need to achieve in order to make the project optimally marketable. And he has said many times we need to get to PFS on a project such as like Santo Tomas before it is marketable. Obviously, there's always the potential of other suitors arriving in advance of that timeline. How much money will be spent in drilling in total?
It's around 11 million Canadian at current exchange rates and around the current plan. That will flex a little though as the final drill plan evolves coming from SRK Whittlework. And in addition, a few of the holes we're planning are to extend South Zone. In the event it extends a little more than we anticipate, there'll be a few more drill holes. So there's some flex in that. But around 11 million CAD is roughly what we anticipate now.
So Connor's asking a question about the major improvements to the South Zone, which you covered earlier, Ian. But let's just give a quick update on how we see the drill program in the South Zone advancing the resource numbers.
So we didn't close off the South Zone resource to the southwest part of the South Zone pit. And we know there's outcrop outside that pit that the team have mapped at surface. So we do expect the pit to move a little more southwest in terms of development. How much more? Probably modest, but there'll be a bit more there. In addition, you've written potential to hit the source, so meaning a deeper or channeled porphyry, perhaps brecciated. We're not seeing evidence that would give us that would cause us to suspect something of that nature will happen. The intrusive monzonites, quartz monzonites that control mineralization at Santo Tomas have a relatively well-defined bottom and top, and the feeders seem to decrease in mineralization as you get to significant depth. So we're not expecting a sort of honeypot that we haven't yet seen derived from this drilling. Possible, yes. Probable, no. So yeah, we're not sort of aiming for anything like that. There's no evidence in the geophysics that there is something of that nature at Santo Tomas. So, we're expecting a little more, but not something that substantially changes the game.
And Connor expresses a thank you for our success. Well, we're only partway there, Connor, but very much appreciated. Thank you. And we very much appreciate the interest that we're seeing in the advancement of Oroco. Bruno has asked a very, I think, important question. And I'll lay this on me because I think during the last town hall. I don't think I articulated sufficiently the nature of the relationship between Oroco Resource Corp, of which you're all shareholders, I assume, and the operating subsidiary in Mexico, which at that point in time was named Xochipala Gold SA to CV, which I stated we were rebranding, and as a part of that rebranding process, renaming that company to Santo Tomas Copper SA to CV. And the relationship is always been the same. Oroco is the parent company. It's a public company residing in Canada. Santo Tomas Copper is our operating subsidiary in Mexico, and it's the company through which all the funds that have been raised in Oroco are directed toward the advancement of Santo Tomas. It is the registered, that company, that operating subsidiary is the registered owner of the Santo Tomas concessions. Now, I've talked about the rebranding and the concept and the reason behind all that is twofold. Number one, we're looking to create a stronger Mexican presence with respect to our operations in Mexico and how we position ourselves, Oroco, a Canadian public company, as the owners, essentially the majority owners, the great majority owners of that particular project. But it's important to many aspects of how we take this project forward within Mexico that we have more of a Mexican identity than simply that being a Canadian public mining exploration company operating in Mexico. We want to be very specific as to the roots of this company, and the roots in many ways relate to people like Ubaldo Treviso, etc., and the people of that choice community who have been a part of this project in one form or another for many, many years. And so our objective is to create a more of a Mexican culture around our operations in Mexico. That's the first reason for the rebranding of Xochipala Gold. Also, as you can appreciate, Xochipala Gold was initiated as a gold company that was operating in Sonora. Now it's a copper company operating in Sinaloa. So it's a natural transition that we probably should have undertaken some time ago. But the second reason is now that we have a value established in many different respects for the project itself, and I'm now going to the technical reports that ultimately develop the NPV numbers, the net present value numbers. The ownership being in Santo Tomas Copper, it becomes a circumstance whereby the primary reference we have to any value associated with that company are those technical reports. And after experiencing what we feel is a very highly diminished value of the overall assets of Oroco, as reflected by the Oroco market over the last few years, we've turned to a scenario whereby we realize that by rebranding Santo Tomas Copper, essentially, that we would generate a circumstance where we could do other forms of financing into that operating entity that wouldn't necessarily be required, nor would they necessarily comply with regulations that are normally applied to entities such as Oroco as a trading Canadian public company. And without going into all the detail of that, I'll just say this. By rebranding the company and creating that stronger Mexican identity, we will also be in a position to be able to do things like work in kind and utilize the ownership of that entity in a way that would reflect a much more preferable return to the investors of Oroco on a share valuation or dilutive basis than we would be able to achieve if the money was generated in Canada through Oroco and passed down to Santo Tomas Copper. In other words, deals can be made utilizing the company Santo Tomas Copper that would be highly advantageous to the shareholders of Oroco by way of the rebranding process. And just so you understand what we're doing to facilitate all that, is we're currently drafting a prospectus for Santo Tomas Copper so as to be able to set that structure up. Not to say that we're not going to continue to work with Canaccord Genuity, but there will be, as I said, times where and opportunities where we can utilize Santo Tomas Copper in a different context, but to the same end result, but on preferred terms than what we're able to realize using Oroco as a funding entity. I hope that's provides a little more clarity. I recall discussions on attempting to find the source or hot zone.
Okay. So adjacent to and intersected by drill hole S18, we went through a fairly significant zone of higher grade, structurally more continuous mineralization. We drilled that hole a little shallower in angle and down in the southwest. So yes, we do expect a zone to continue south of hole S18. And we'll be putting holes in there to try and establish whether there is indeed a core of higher grade in that part of South Zone. The earlier question inferred that we would be finding some intrusive locus that was of higher grade. That's not what we expect. We just expect that that part of South Zone may carry higher grade, and we're hopeful for that, and we'll test it comprehensively in this program.
Following on my PFS question, what kind of discount do you see or expect properties like Santo Tomas being sold at once the PFS study level is reached? That's highly speculative to try and answer that question, Alex. I mean, there's certain metrics that are used to acquiring projects like Santo Tomas. Pounds in the ground are one of them. The PFS numbers would certainly relate to whatever sale price is ultimately established. There are ranges of discounts on projects like that, assuming PFS status. Normally, they run somewhere between 30 and 50% of the net present value that's established through that process. Is that a fair assessment?
That's fair. Yep.
Thomas is asking, where is Richard today? Richard's is he in Mexico today?
No, he's at home
in Montana, organizing the overall drill campaign, etc.
Correct
for the year.
And Andrew is in Choix. I'll be joining Andrew down there next week. Yeah. So and I anticipate Richard will be back in Mexico perhaps the following week.
Quinn asks, why do you no longer publish the slide that shows the additional NPV upside sensitivity versus upside to copper above $4?
I think, Quinn, those are in the PEA report. We extracted them directly from the PEA, so they're available there and in historical decks. If that's a suggestion that we put it in the appendix to our public presentation, we can do that.
Oliver asks, what are your efforts to get a new audience and shareholders? I'll turn this over to Mike in a second, but I'll say this, Oliver. We are very conscious of the fact that we need to expand our audience. I mean, this is something that we were working at on essentially a limited budget basis in 2025. From that, as Mike pointed out earlier, the data is telling us that despite the fact that we were essentially in-house in those activities, we made some distinct progress. but Mike will now tell you what the plan is going forward.
Yeah, so having a budget is going to allow us to not only expand our current social media in-house work, but also we're going to be able to engage with third parties such as influencers and podcasters and newsletter writers. This is going to, put Oroco in front of all of their audiences as well. We're also thinking about the conferences and events that we potentially would attend, and that's going to put Oroco in person in front of a lot of new audience members. So, a lot of it is just getting the name in front of other people's audiences who have loyal followings and get them to see Oroco as we do and as the podcaster does. So that's where we're going.
Mr. Anonymous asks the question, the short volume exploded to 17 million last week. I'm going to stop right there before I ask. I don't recall that. Did you ever see a number to that effect?
Not that high.
No. So I now understand why you've positioned yourself as Mr. Anonymous. Did the Cancord, well, actually, just to help you, it's spelled CANACCORD, it's Canaccord. And did their deal invite a new cohort of stock price manipulators? I certainly do not believe so. Or are there any actual shareholders? Well, I truly believe there are. Somehow these people generated $23 million, which was delivered to the company last Wednesday, was it?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that
And I certainly
institutional-
take offense to that type of comment. I think it's ridiculous.
I thought we saw a transition to more institutionally based financing, and the institutions that participated have very, very good reputations and are typically long-hold institutions. So we were thrilled with the participants to the project.
Will Richard Locke ever be visible to shareholders? Of course he will. As a matter of fact, I think you're going to see much more of Richard this year. Last year, there was during 2025, there was really no need to involve Richard in much of the complexity that we were working through behind the scenes. The simple fact is that Richard as an engineer and a very disciplined engineer has a very specific focus on the advancement of Santo Tomas. I think as we get re-engaged with that process, you will see Richard much more frequently. I think one of the things we'll try to do is Ian and Richard host one or more of these town halls from the site itself once the project is fully in gear again.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that through our engagement with Canaccord and their sales desk introducing us to the institutions that participated in the financing, Richard was the anchor on all of those meetings.
So HW is asking about the Huetes Reservoir diversion to be included in the PFS. Not at present. It's one of the things that I think Whittle will be considering as we go forward. But the PFS is going to focus essentially on the mine plan that was part of and essentially the core of the PEA. It may well be that the diversion, because it would come along so much later in the ultimate mine plan itself, that it won't be involved in any respect prior to a sale of the project or some sort of transaction regarding the advancement of the project. And you asked the question as it relates to the Mexican stakeholders. Yes, that's one of the reasons that we would continue to consider the diversion and the resulting access to the part of the ore body that we know resides within the area surrounding the exclusionary zone around the reservoir. It's important to the community because it theoretically at least extends the mine life considerably. which of course is a direct benefit to the local community itself. So yeah, they're very much interested in it, as we are. Will additional environmental permitting be needed for that? Of course, but it's not something that's going to obstruct us or impede us in our current focus on the production of the PFS. Does Locke still get a certain percentage of the proceeds when the mine is sold? No, that's not the arrangement with Richard. I don't know why you would say, Quinn, that does he still get a certain percentage? It's never been the arrangement with Richard. Thomas says, you mentioned good things coming in 12 to 18 months. When is the latest you expect serious acquisition, joint venture activity, etc.? Is the end of 2027 fair? I think that's literally the far end of that window. I think anything can happen in 2027 once the drill campaign is completed. The 2026 drill campaign is completed. Okay, Thomas, thank you. Is the company fully funded to take us all the way to buyout? No, not in practical terms. I said earlier, I think we have to raise about another 10 odd million along the way. Ideally, we'd want to, and this is supported by Canaccord as well, obviously, because of the fact that they've got so many people involved at the 38-cent level. They want to see a maximum return. So they want to see the next financing done, ideally at much higher levels. We've been specific in our discussions with them, and they concur. But that number or that amount is likely in the range of 10 million necessary to take us well through the PFS. Next question from HW. With increasing investor interest in Oroco, do you see possibilities to make Oroco stock easier to acquire to investors from the US and Europe? As many complain they cannot buy stock from the TSX. Yes, it is our intention to make it easier for people in those jurisdictions to acquire the stock. One of the methods of accomplishing that goal is a listing on the big board of the TSX, and that's currently in a debate again. We raised it last year because it was essentially an intention that we aired in one of our town halls. It's still a lingering intention. We weren't in position last year financially to do so, but I think it's a discussion that is yet to be had in a finite way with Canaccord Genuity and other interested parties. So I really can't answer that question with any specificity other than to say, yes, it is something that, Mike and I were talking about exactly how we may best do that over the last number of days. So it's an answer that probably would be better provided at our next town hall. Terry's asking, what is the appropriate price of copper to use for valuation? Is it still the 3-year average in a rising market? That's a general rule, Terry, yes. And I think it's a good point that you make there, because it provides some context as to why, for example, Whittle and their assessments used $4.40 copper while the price was well over $5. There are general standards by which copper pricing are applied in valuations such as that which we're seeking at Santo Tomas. And so, despite the 580 price or whatever it is today, it's essentially a target price that we hope to be able to apply in large part, although I wouldn't expect by the time the PFS is actually completed that we would have been able to apply a price anywhere close to 580 to the ultimate valuation numbers. But certainly we'd hope for something higher than the current 440, which seems to be the immediate standard. Do you still own Gold Group Mining shares? What is the plan here? No, we don't. We liquidated Gold Group Mining shares during the latter stages of 2025. Edward is asking, do you have any plan to also hire a PR marketing company? Not initially, but anything's on the table that makes sense, primarily from a distribution and economic sense. We'll consider anything and everything, and it's a matter of a practical application of where we see the best results being generated within a modicum of economic prudence. Etienne, nice to have you back, Etienne. Congratulations for this financing. What is the biggest risk regarding the execution of the PFS? I've covered this a couple times already. I think it relates to two aspects of our circumstance in Mexico, the regulatory and the environment, secondarily, the environment around the existence of cartels in Mexico. We're very confident now that we have the people and the pathway in place to from a regulatory perspective to move through any permitting process that's yet to be required. None are required at this particular time, and none are required to get us through the balance of the exploration phases this year. As far as the cartels are concerned, they are not a factor in the development of Santo Tomas. That's all I can say. CA does show 17 million short. Well, that's fine, but yesterday they showed 480 something, so 480,000. So obviously, some people would have gone short into a financing that ultimately resulted in 60 million units being issued. But I'm not going to comment again on the nature of the trading in our market. I know this, that we raised some of those questions ourselves internally, and we're satisfied that there was no manipulation of any sort, particularly other than the obvious tendency of some parties to sell into a market, particularly when you've got a circumstance where the financing is concluded at one particular moment in time, and very shortly thereafter, within hours, we're trading at essentially a level that was in excess of 50% of the pricing of that financing, and parties may yet have received, may yet be or still be expecting to receive their shares, which were not yet distributed as a part of the Treasury order and share issuance process, and quite possibly parties that had participated in the financing but not received their shares as yet, and that would have been a very small window, perhaps a day or so, would have sold their shares, the shares they expected to receive short. Is that market manipulation? I don't believe so. How many warrants are outstanding to be converted? What amount of money would you create in Canadian dollars? Would that amount fit to finish to essentially take us through to the end of the PFS process? Yeah, if all the warrants were exercised, clearly that would happen, Oliver. Although I fully expect many of the warrant holders, because of the length of the warrants, particularly the last 30 million that were involved, 30 million odd, that were involved with the financing that we just completed. That's a 3-year term on those warrants, and I think the smart money would ride those warrants out to the end of the PFS process. So we wouldn't see much of that converted. Will the company force the exercise of the warrants to fund the 10 million? No, that was not a provision in the financing.
That's all the questions.
There we are.
Excellent.
And we've still got 89 attendees.
69.
Was it 69 now?
69.
Well, somebody must have a question.
While we're waiting, I'll add in there that Oroco will be attending the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference on Sunday and Monday of this coming week. We have a booth at 9:27. Ian and I will be there for most of the time. So if you're in town or you're attending the conference, please come by and say hi. We'd love to chat with you. Ian's going to be giving a presentation at just after 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon. So hope we get to see you there.
So we have some more responses. I'm going to enjoy reading this one. Thank you very much for the town hall and the possibility to ask questions. I've been a shareholder for 5 years, and I'm very happy about the work and progress you made in the last year, culminating in the successful financing. Looking forward to a fantastic year after the tough years behind us. HW, we totally share your view, not so much in patting ourselves on the back, but in the fact that we are indeed looking forward to a fantastic year for Oroco, certainly after the tough years that are now behind us. Oliver, great work today. Thank you. Thank you, Oliver. Quinn is back. Last year, Ian indicated he was going to do a presentation regarding historic copper industry M&A. Will this still happen?
I haven't put it all together, but we certainly could do that. It's going to be a busy few weeks ahead, so I won't commit in the near term, but that might be something we can put together. Yeah.
Terry's asking roughly when we might expect the first drill results to be publicly released.
Terry, as we're moving into a period of resource infill, etc., we'll put the results out obviously as we get them. But we've got to get drilling. We've got to restart the assay process, restart all the QA/QC processes. I'm not quite sure when the first results will be out. We'll put them out when they're available. And looking forward to doing that. But yeah, I mean, I think collectively we don't see getting results out the earliest day possible as the key here. We know we have a multi-billion-dollar NPV project based on the PEA. We're gonna focus on work streamlining, etc.
Will there be any other big hurdles for the company to overcome before the buyout? Or is it clear sailing and more technical matters at this point? I don't ever want to say that it's clear sailing. I see it as being clear sailing because I firmly believe that what we face in a practical sense, and I think we do now understand the depths of the regulatory issues that faced us in previous years. And that again is the primary concern. Understanding what it takes to work through that process, and now having the assistance of a number of people that are quite specifically experienced in that respect, and most particularly, I identify Faisal Rodriguez as being a leader in that respect. I do believe that everything that's in front of us, whatever obstacle may arise, I believe that it will be manageable. We've overcome all of the tough obstacles. Yeah, I think you all know how long it took us to land this project in the first place. I mean, it took a 9-year struggle legally to unwind and ultimately secure the ownership of the project. We are of a singular mind in the sense that we will see this through, bottom line. And I'm not intimidated by this process in any respect whatsoever. So there's been a comment about the shorting, and I just want to say, yeah, I reacted to it because in my mind, it's the term manipulation does not apply to what's gone on in our market. I think it's quite understandable. And I'll just repeat what I'm quite sure happened. There was a significant surge in our market the day that financing closed, and you know, there are a lot of professional participants in our market by way of that particular financing, and there was a time lag between the closing of the financing and the time at which the shares associated with those purchases would have actually been made available to the accounts of those purchasers. And I think there's a number of industry players that were involved in that financing. I know there are that would quite likely look to take advantage of that particular circumstance. In other words, the significant uptick in our share price that would have been realized before they actually received the proceeds of the sale in terms of the shares that they purchased. And the fact that they would then go short and take delivery off the prospectus financing is not, in my mind, an untoward or in somehow an issue that we should be concerned about. I mean, I did check into this in some detail because I had similar concerns. Anything like that happens, and I'm concerned about it. But I'm fully satisfied as to the sequence of events, and I can understand why it was that essentially an opportunity was presented to many of those shareholders that essentially they chose to take advantage of in a legitimate and totally proper way. And by the way, the interesting thing about that whole circumstance, and I'm talking about the 21 million shares that traded that day, is for every share that was sold, there was a buyer. And we've got to look at that from the other side of the spectrum. And that is what that signified. That certainly there were people that were clearly selling because of the fact that they were expecting delivery of a substantial number of shares. But on the other side of that coin was the fact that we had substantial post-financing interest that manifested itself in that market to the tune that 21 million shares traded that day. And I believe the number was 13.5 million shares traded the next day. So for every share that was sold, there was a buyer, which was a great thing in terms of resetting essentially the baseline trading levels in our market, which is a good thing for all shareholders. I just thought those comments were necessary. Currently, the big copper mining companies seem to be more focused on merging with each other. That's very true. When will the mentality switch to acquiring new projects for future development? Well, I'll tell you what. Let the copper thesis tell that story. The bottom line is, all of these companies are going to run out of future production opportunities sooner than later. And I'll give you the example of Sumitomo. About a year and a half ago, conversations that we had, one individual or another with Sumitomo, generated a response that essentially was that they didn't look at anything that was under 1%, 1% copper grade. More recently, I heard the number had come down to 0.6%. And then very, very recently, I heard that Sumitomo was open to any project that was economical. And that's how the market has changed. And it'll continue to change as the pendulum swings further and further toward the demand side. And these mining companies certainly will have completed their merging processes, etc., and will look, and not only the mining companies, the smelters that are being built. Two, for example, in significant smelters are being built in India as we speak. And I believe there's certain Chinese and Japanese smelters that are now looking for long-term product. All of this will play into the marketability of Santo Tomas in due course. And that's why we are better to continue to advance this project to its maximum in terms of the NPV generation, without necessarily chasing suitors at this time. Our advantage is time is on our side, very much so. And our greatest advantage is allowing ourselves to get through this PFS process. And the greatest leverage is associated with the value today versus the value at the end of that process. So, we've all been in this for a long time. Myself, I've been in it for 20 years. And, another year or so isn't much of an issue for me. But of course, I'm different. What percentage of resource growth do you expect from the infill drilling? Good question.
Great question. Can't say. We expect it to grow. There's no doubt about that. But to what degree it'll impact, very difficult to say. We need to do the work.
Quinn is saying thank you very much for re-engaging the company. It made a huge difference. Thank you for that, Quinn. I also appreciate responding to your emails. Look, this has been good for us too. It's given us a much more specific direction. Yeah, I think it's good. It's been good for everybody concerned, both shareholders and management, and particularly those now that in choice are going to see the fruits of these labors. And yeah, it's a big difference for everybody all the way around. What events could delay the PFS? Not many. Nothing that
I don't see any significant risk. We're going to retain the engineering companies earlier in the process than one might normally do because they're very busy, the engineers, in the current sort of boom in the mining sector. So we'll definitely tie them down early to make sure we're not affected by their availability. So we're definitely, I would say that's not a large risk, but perhaps a timing risk. And we're going to solve that by engaging early. We've already gone through that. Don't really see any other large items.
No. Nick's comment is good explanation on the short position. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do that. As for myself, I'm often too complicated in terms of how I explain these things. So I'm glad that I was able to get to convey the detail of what I know happened. Yeah, it's just it's, as I said, every share that was sold into that market surge, is now in the hands of somebody that's an Oroco shareholder, and that's great for the company and great for the other shareholders.
Very good.
That's it.
Yeah. Onward and upward from Nick. That's a great way to
Exactly.
end the conversation. Yeah, thanks, Nick, and onward and upward it is.
So in summary, you've got a good picture, I hope, of what we're doing, at least a sufficient picture today of what we're doing operationally on site. As I said earlier, we're already working on creating the road access to the drill sites that were largely mapped out 2 or 3 years ago. So there's not a lot of preparation that needs to be done in that respect. The drilling contracts in the process of being essentially let to interested parties. We expect a quick return on that. The marketing efforts are now being shaped in a number of respects, some of which Mike's referenced here today. The regulatory process and the political support is clearly in play now. It's all systems go, literally. And the catalyst for all of this, of course, is the support that we got from a very determined effort, particularly by Gunnar Eggertson, in terms of what he saw in Oroco and his literal determination to see the company financed to the point that it could essentially resurrect our overall exploration process and program at Santo Tomas and get back to work. The initial planning for that process certainly didn't reflect ultimately what occurred, particularly from a financing perspective, but it allowed us to expand our exploration program, our drill program, etc., beyond what we were initially thinking was going to be necessary. And that in itself is created just that little bit of extra momentum that we needed to really move into 2026 with a high degree of enthusiasm. So we hope that that enthusiasm is shared by all of our shareholders. Yeah, and one point I want to make is Mike mentioned earlier the town halls being held every 2 months or so. I think we'll be try and be quite diligent about that in terms of you can expect going forward every 2 months, mid-month or so, we will, and starting in March, we'll schedule a town hall, regardless of what may be thought to be achievable prior to that point in time. I think it's something that our shareholders are now coming to expect, and we'll go out of our way to put that together. And hopefully the next time it'll be from Mexico, and we'll have Richard involved. Just so you know, he's not just a name only.
He certainly isn't when he's on the other end of the phone to me,
Absolutely.
directing
Absolutely.
certain outcomes. So I can assure you all, he is
Very much.
he's very real and very effective.
Okay. How are we doing? A few thank yous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I guess we're done, guys and gals. Another enjoyable Oroco moment. So now we're going to go back to work here in the office and leave you guys to your people to your day. Have a great day, everyone. Know that Oroco is finally going somewhere and it's positive. So I'm not going to bring out my MOGA hat yet. Bad timing around the world these days to make any reference to making things great again. But certainly our intention is to make Oroco great again. So on that note, we say goodbye.